At 84 Lumber, training is a key to the company's success, from recruitment, retention, and employee development.
The managers in each location, I think they truly view it as part of their role to be developing people. So it's not just selling and running the operation, but thinking about who's next. We hire many people into that manager trainee role, and they get promoted throughout the company. And part of that is that we have to train and develop those individuals. And the culture of the company is that as a manager, that's part of your role.
That's Sue Kasko, Senior Director Talent Development at 84 Lumber. Learn how this corporation invests in its most important resource, its people. Next on Powered by Learning.
Powered by Learning is brought to you by DaVinci Interactive. DaVinci's approach to learning is grounded in 30 years of innovation and expertise. We use proven strategies and leading technology to develop solutions that empower learners to improve quality and boost performance. Learn more at davinci.com.
Joining me today is Angeline Evans, Client Solutions Consultant at DaVinci, and our guest, Sue Kasko, Senior Director Talent Development at 84 Lumber. Founded in 1956 and headquartered in 84, Pennsylvania, 84 Lumber Company is the nation's largest privately held supplier of building materials, manufactured components, and industry-leading services for single and multifamily residences and commercial buildings. It operates 320 facilities, which include stores, component manufacturing plants, custom door shops, and engineered wood product centers in 33 states. Sue, welcome to Powered by Learning.
It's nice to see you again, Sue.
Hi, good afternoon. It's great to see both of you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us. Sue, start out by telling us a little bit about your background and your role at 84 Lumber.
Sure. Well, I think like many of us in learning and development, I've ended up career-wise where I am today by a series of what I consider fortunate events. In school, I was an economics major, really nothing to do with learning and development, and always had an interest in the hotel industry. So that's where I started my career. And interestingly, when I was working my very first job for the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, we were in the process of applying for the Malcolm Baldrige Award. And it's a quality-focused award. I'm sure many people listening are familiar with that. And as part of what I worked on there, I came to realize how important people were to making everything successful, whether it was process-focused or some other aspect of a business. And so I ended up going back to school, getting an MBA, and really wanted to change direction in my career. And so through a series of organizations I worked for, I worked in finance positions and always gravitated toward projects where people were involved. And ultimately, I ended up in a performance consulting type of role. I worked in the airline industry, and then after that for several years in retail with Dick's Sporting Goods, and have been here at 84 Lumber for 6 years now.
That's quite a journey.
Yeah, it's all over the place, but I find so many colleagues who I meet in our field have a similar story, right? They ended up here because of a passion and interest in learning, helping people develop. And so I feel really fortunate to be here at 84 today in the role that I'm in. Here, our team is responsible for all learning and development across the organization. I'll say leading it in the sense of putting in formal learning in place. So we do onboarding and role-specific training, leadership development, compliance training, as well as other pieces of talent, things like performance management and employee engagement, as well as internal communications.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there are a number of roles at 84 Lumber. Can you tell me a little bit about the roles that your department serves?
Sure. So our business is actually quite varied. If people are familiar with the company, they often think of our store locations, which you mentioned in the introduction. And I would say they're the heart of the company and really where we started. So we have, of course, many different roles in the stores, starting with what I consider our core foundational role. We call it a manager trainee. It's the entry-level position into our stores organization. Almost every associate who starts in that part of the business starts in that role or one of our yard associate positions. And then we have various paths. We have operational roles, which are more like dispatch and operations management. We have a big piece of the store business around sales, of course. So we have a lot of sales positions, as well as some of the leaders and managers in the stores. But we have a whole other part of the business that's focused on connected, of course, components, which is building components manufacturing. So manufacturing part of the business. We have engineered wood, EWP. We have installed, so installed sales as well. And in those parts of the business, there are a variety of roles as well. Manufacturing, of course, we have production associates, leadership roles, design. So design, building, like designing trusses and wall panels, et cetera, that then we then build. So a variety of different roles.
And with that, a variety of different training needs, I'm sure.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of those different role types. I'd love to know how you handle training an audience with so many diversity and skill sets and geographically dispersed across the company. It just feels like a lot to take on.
It is a lot. I say a couple of things. First of all, as far as modalities, we approach it with lots of a variety of different methods. We use classroom training, we use online training, we create videos and do video series on certain topics. We focus a lot on resources and performance support and how to help people in their roles, putting in structured learning paths. So some of it becomes a little bit self-serve for some of those audiences. I would say probably one of the key components, because of what you mentioned, the geographical dispersion and also the variety of different roles, is the role that the manager or the leader on each location plays in learning. And so we put a lot of responsibility on those store managers and other leaders in part of our business to take on that as part of their role. They're developing the future talent of the organization, and they are training the individuals in their stores. And so, of course, our team's function is to support them in doing that. And so some of that is through the formal learning that we create. Some of it is by creating that structure that then they can implement in the store. So whether that be an onboarding checklist or an online learning plan that a new associate would follow. But that manager is really key because they're there at that location. That on-the-job training is how a lot of the skills that you maybe learn piece of it in a classroom, but it's the actual applying it, doing it on the job that really brings that learning home. And so that manager is really critical to that. And not just the geographical dispersion, but our business is very unique market to market. So even if we're based here in 84 PA, which is Pittsburgh. So if we bring people here to Pittsburgh and they are in a classroom setting learning something, we're teaching the common principle that would apply to many. But when you go to a location, what happens in that store in that location might be very different based on market conditions, their customer base, their local building codes. And so that manager translating what we do into what it's like in their environment is really important.
That's really interesting. I'm sure, and I mean, I know a number of organizations have a similar setup where their regional managers might serve as trainers. How do you get those managers comfortable with being in that training role? Because it's different than just, being a supervisor to a team or a team lead. I mean, training does have a different aspect to it. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So part of it, I think, is our culture. As I mentioned, the managers in each location, I think they truly view it as part of their role to be developing people. So it's not just selling and running the operation, but thinking about who's next. We hire many people into that manager trainee role, and they get promoted throughout the company. And so part of that is that we have to train and develop those individuals. And the culture of the company is that as a manager, that's part of your role. So I would say that's one piece of it. But also, many of them have also gone through a lot of the same learning experiences. So they have that foundation as well. We also, I think part of the structure we put in place helps with that. So for example, when we have new store associates in that manager trainee role, we have them all come to Pittsburgh in probably between 4 and 6 weeks in role. So from all over the country, they come here to our training center where they go through an experience called Lumber Camp.
I love that name.
Yeah.
I know. I know.
Sounds like fun.
It does sound like fun. I want to go to lumber camp.
It's a lot of fun. We even have dorms here. You can stay in dorms, and I'm sure you would
stop it. That's awesome.
enjoy staying in a bunk bed as well. But it's ironically, it is part of the experience that I think builds the culture in the organization. But we bring everyone here so they have that same foundation. So that we have a new associate, they learn basic product knowledge, blueprints, material estimating, some of our basic sales models, so that when they go back to the location where the manager's leading the on-the-job training, we know that everyone has a core foundation the same, which helps managers know, okay, this is what we're working with and what our starting point is. And along with that, we have for that role a pretty extensive self-study program, continuing education, which is an expanded version of pretty much most of those topics that I mentioned along there. So that lumber camp is a foundational piece that I think sets the individuals up for success, but also the managers, to your point there, Angeline, about, how do the managers handle that? So that's one of the things.
I love to hear that the managers are really getting developed holistically to know that they're developing people and just not managing the work. So I think that's wonderful. How much time? I mean, I know it's a lot to be a manager in those different roles. How much time do you think they invest in training each month or each week, just out of curiosity?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I can say an exact number. I would say it depends, of course, on lots of variables. But one of the things is I think that responsibility is shared. So, for example, if there's a role in the store called a co-manager, and that person is, think almost like an assistant manager type of role. They are directly responsible day to day for guiding the manager trainees. And I would say, probably in some ways, if that person is new, half their day they're spending really helping that person, whether that training is literally walking them through how to do something in the system or reviewing product knowledge with them, or maybe just answering the myriad of questions a new person has when they start a job. And so it is a large part of their role. And then a store manager, it would be probably less, but dependent on if they have a new salesperson. Maybe they're spending a day a week out driving to customers with them to help coach them through that process.
So there's that shoulder to shoulder aspect.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, Sue, outside of the in person training that you do with managers and that managers do with their team, what other sort of delivery formats do you offer at 84 Lumber?
So, one of the things I think I briefly mentioned were videos. So, one of the things that we implemented a couple years ago that has been very popular are we call them 5-minute foundations. So, they're 5-minute ish videos around a very targeted topic. And we take a specific topic. It could be anything from the credit system we use to right now we're doing a series on doors and door knowledge. And so the training team works on creating a video around that specific topic. We publish them monthly. And as I said, they're very popular. People can access them wherever they are in the stores. They're always available through our learning management system as well. So that's one example. We do quite a bit of online training as well. So again, a variety of topics. We use an app for vendor product knowledge. So we use a third-party app where it's a little bit of the micro-learning, incentivized training that people can access on their mobile devices. That's also been really popular for our store associates because they have that little bit of incentive of being able to earn points when they complete training. But at the same time, we're feeding them those nuggets of ongoing information. In the product area, which, as you can imagine, products are always changing. And so you have to continually learn about new features, et cetera.
That's awesome. I love hearing about all those micro learning initiatives and even a little like subscription learning approach, I guess I would say.
Also, like going back to the live training thing, I think one of the things that since I've been here at 84, I found very unique is that building on charging our managers to do training and learning and lead their associates, our area managers run a program they call 84 University every year. And with that, we bring together, so the learning team supports it by creating an agenda, pulling together the content and the materials, pulling in videos or activities, whatever we need to do. But it is then we do a bit of, I'll call it kind of train the trainer with our area managers. And then they take that content and they pull together associates from their locations into some kind of in-person session where they deliver that content. They make it a more extended learning experience. Of course, they have the ability to flex that content to what's needed in their region, or maybe do an add-on thing like going to tour a plant or something like that to create that learning experience. So it's really a blended partnership between learning and our leaders to create these learning experiences in lots of different ways.
That's great. So hearing more about that, I want to take a step back. So I see how involved you are in all of the different aspects at 84 Lumber. And when we last spoke, you mentioned you were working on a career lattice. And you also mentioned at the beginning of this session about, the culture of promoting within. Can you talk to me a little bit more about that? And it sounds like that's not just hearing all of the different training avenues you take. How do you not have a culture of promoting within, right?
Sure. I'll start there because those, I think both parts of your question are related. So the promote from within, 84, I mentioned before, we have this manager trainee position in our stores. And that is the entry level position for pretty much everyone in that part of the business. And so how seriously we take promoting from within, nearly 100% of our store managers, area managers, divisional vice presidents, all started as manager trainees in our store. And so we have an incredible commitment to promoting from within. We make I'll say almost a promise to our new hires that we'll hire you. You don't need to know anything about our industry, anything about our business. We'll teach you what you need to know. If you make that commitment to, I'm willing to work hard and willing to learn. And so if you think about if that's the culture that we start with, learning is so important to that because you're taking somebody who knows nothing and you are making that investment to say this person will be a next leader in our organization somewhere. And so that promote from within culture, I think, creates this inherent buy-in or belief in that learning and training is important in the organization. And there, for a long time, that traditional path was I get hired as a manager trainee, I get promoted to a co-manager, I become a store manager, maybe go into sales, but then, that's the path. It was very linear. And as the business has grown and changed over the years, the needs are different as we've developed much larger stores and different customer bases. The other positions like dispatchers and operations managers and sales coordinators and install managers, they're all different roles that maybe didn't exist or weren't prominent, a couple decades ago. So as that has changed, the training focus has to change as well. So we used to be very focused on how do we support that one linear path. And now we have to say, like using your term of career lattice, that there's not a straight path to the top anymore, right? There are probably lots of zigzags and side routes that are really important to be successful now in another leadership role where you have a broader scope of responsibility. And so when we think about it from a learning perspective, we're working with the business to understand like what are some of those key career points that are needed from a learning, both a skill and experience perspective in order to be successful later on. So as we do that, we're shifting a little bit of our learning strategy from, hey, let's just support just those core roles to say, okay, what are the other key transition points and how do we support that from a learning perspective more formally than just saying, hey, they'll teach you on the job, but how do we marry that with something more formal? And then helping map out what that looks like. Because I think there's a lot of people who are very smart and very ingrained in our business who understand that, but it's not mapped out anywhere. And so I think we can help add value by saying, okay, based on, the information, what we've collected and pulled together and all the data and the research we're doing with you, we can say, here are the key points and almost taking a little bit of that skills approach to say, here are the skills. And then how do we build a learning plan or a learning approach that will support that skill development to support that career lattice? So as you make those zigs and zags in your career, that you have the learning that matches up with what you need to ultimately end up with the skill and experience set for success.
It sounds like from day one, 84 Lumber is invested in those team members and they have to feel that connection to the company. And I would also think a sense of pride in working for a company that has such an excellent reputation. How do you infuse that sense of pride and that commitment to brand through the training that you're doing?
I think it goes right back to lumber camp and thinking about like it is a cultural experience. It's one of the reasons I think we make the investment in bringing people from all over the country who are really, entry level, new to the company here to say, hey, this is really important. And you may work in a state where we have very few locations and you may not even have known there were other 84 Lumbers. And we bring you here and you're like, wow, I'm meeting people from all over the country who work for the same company. And we have a shared set of interests and values. And so it creates that bond with people that I see as people come back to various learning events. And as I encounter them throughout their career, they remember those people and experiences from the beginning. So that helps infuse that culture. I really think like some of those principles, and I was not joking about like staying in the dorms and sharing a bunk bed. There's just something about, sleeping with a bunkmate that you build a bond there. And we do things while they're here. Like our dorms are very nice. So don't picture some freshman dorm maybe, I had a few years ago. They're very nice. We have a fire pit outside. So we encourage that like social interaction, etc. And then that culture is across our organization, our marketing team, our internal communications, which is a part of the umbrella of talent as well. They reinforce all of those messages. Having our area managers teach 84 University helps reinforce those cultural things. They're seeing a lot of the behaviors modeled by others in the organization. So I think it starts early, and those cultural messages are all around them. And it is reflected, I think, we talk a lot about the 84 family here. And when we do our employee engagement surveys, I see a lot of feedback and comments about, we talk about 84 family and it feels real. People here care about my career. They care about me. And I think it does come back to some of that investment that managers and leaders are making in their teams.
Well, by doing that investment, you're making it a career, not just a job.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of competition for talent today, and especially bringing people into the organization early in their career where you're trying to still figure out that fit. Where do I fit? And when you find people who fit with the culture and want to build their career here, there's a lot of opportunity for them and for us.
Yeah, super powerful for employee engagement and retention. So I saw recently that you presented last spring at ATD's International Conference. Can you tell us a little bit about the concepts from your session and how you might apply them at 84 Lumber?
Sure. I'm a member of the ATD Forum group, and so I presented a session as part of that group with them. And it was the theme around it, or the main message was around how do we make learning stickier? So I think that's a challenge. Learning professionals the world over share is that we invest so much in creating learning. And when people have that learning experience, you want them to walk away actually remembering and being able to apply that information. And so that was the theme of the presentation. And it was looking at really durable learning principles and how you can integrate those into learning design, and not just learning design, but just maybe your whole learning culture and approach to learning. In that session, we did a very specific application activity to try to illustrate some of that connection. So we used a reflection tool that a lot of people may have seen before, something called just like 3-2-1, which was the name of the session, 3-2-1, make it stick. Like when you have a learning experience, reflecting on it, identifying like 3 concepts or ideas that stood out to you, kind of the 3 main points. The 2, so what are 2 things from this that I can connect to something I already know or have been thinking about? And then that 1, like what's that 1 thing I want to explore more, or a question I still have? And so in doing that, if you built in that kind of reflection activity, maybe into part of a learning experience that you have, and it could be anything, it could be classroom, it could be online, where you're prompting someone to process what they're learning in a different way. It's connecting to some of those durable learning principles. So for example, we talked about durable learning principles, the ones that Accenture has developed and written a lot about. And so we use that as the basis of that. And so one of them is just, contextual. So is the learning contextual? Meaning, can I connect it to some context I already have, something I know, to help make those connections in your brain a little bit stronger? And that's what are 2 concepts, the 2 that I can connect to something I already know? And so it was an opportunity for the people in the session to then kind of apply that and think about, as I look across all of these durable learning principles, how can I incorporate them and how do they make learning stickier? So that's a little bit about what it was about. I mean, I thought the content was great. And interestingly, some members of our team here at 84 were able to attend and listen to it. And one of my team members afterwards said, Sue, what would be really great is if we took these durable learning principles and we took one of the programs that we have in place right now and kind of bumped it up against them and said, where can we make our program stickier? So, for example, thinking about like, how are we making it relevant? What makes it engaging? How are we incorporating reflection? How do we make it contextual? Like, look across all of those and say, how can we tweak it? And so we're going to do that at the end of the year. We picked 2 programs. When we have our annual roundup where we think about planning for next year, we're going to do that. So I thought that's almost a creative way. It's not really in the learning design up front, but kind of going back and reflecting on what we're doing today and how can we improve it.
That's great. Great plan for the future.
Yeah, I love it. We're all in a battle against that forgetting curve. So I really like that.
Oh, I know. It's a tough one.
So finally, we ask all of our guests, what's ahead for you in training? And if you're dipping your toe into anything new or innovative. So oftentimes we'll hear folks talk about AI, if they're just dabbling just a smidge in that to help them generate training faster or even just analyze data. I'd love to hear if there's any new things on the horizon for 84 Lumber.
Yeah, I would say that I probably fall in that category of dabbling in AI. We're like everyone else, you can't escape it today. So we would think about like, how can we really leverage AI? And I do feel like in learning and development, there are a lot of tools out there that are pretty ahead of the curve, maybe as even in some of the other parts of the business, and very accessible to us. So we on the learning team, for example, we're using some tools to help us with a video creation. So a lot of that text to voice, and some really good animated characters that you can bring into the video that are very lifelike. It really has streamlined some of that video production on our end for training videos where we're explaining, we're integrating it into some of our online courses. So we're trying to get a little better at that, and it's the time savings. And it's the convenience of, okay, if we have to change the script because there's an edit, we don't have to bring someone back in and re-record them and do all that editing. That's been really beneficial to us so far. So I say a little dabbling. I don't, I know a lot of people are doing that. That's not really cutting edge. But one of the things that we've also been thinking about, I may have mentioned earlier that part of what we do is we try to provide resources to help those, across the country for learning to be able to access them in the time of need. So I'm thinking about like, how do we use AI in some way to help with performance support? One of the challenges that we have is that difference in markets, locations, et cetera. And what I was saying before about products being different in every location. Like, how do you teach all of that? How do you teach the nuances that exist across 300 locations? I mean, we can't have 300 different training programs on every product. So what does that look like? And so is there a performance support tool that we could give access to individuals to that in the moment of need, just like, when your dryer breaks is when you want to watch the YouTube video on how to fix it, so
Right.
In that moment of need, when someone needs to understand, okay, how do I do a takeoff in my store? I like to do a materials estimate in consideration of the local building codes, et cetera. How do I get that information in front of me right away? And so, it's an area of interest for us where we're just starting to explore how can we build some really dynamic performance support tools that would help go forward. And so if there's anyone listening who has some great ideas or just wants to brainstorm about that, I would love to talk to people about it because I would say that is where we're dipping our toe in and want to try to go next.
That's a tall order, but that sounds like that would be so helpful for your team.
Yeah. I mean, if we can, and I'm sure there's baby steps, right? So I'm sure there's incremental ways we can get there. But I do think that it would be something in the future that would be very helpful.
Well, you need to promise us in a few years or whenever you get this launched, come back on and share again with us about what you've done, because it sounds like a great plan forward.
I would be happy to.
Well, Sue, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
I appreciate it.
Yes, thanks, Sue.
Thank you for having me.
Angeline, it's great to learn about 84 Lumber's commitment to learning and how it positively affects their workforce.
It is, and we hear this so often when we talk to learning leaders that training is such a key player when it comes to recruitment, engagement, and retention, and leadership development.
Absolutely. And it all starts with Lumber Camp.
Oh my gosh, I'm so jealous I didn't get to go to Lumber Camp.
I know. We'll have to have Sue sign us up. So.
Yes.
Thanks, Angeline. And special thanks to our guest, Sue Kasko of 84 Lumber. If you have a suggestion for a topic or a guest, please reach out to us at poweredbylearning@davinci.com. And don't forget that you can subscribe to Powered by Learning wherever you listen to your podcasts.